Welcome to the table, Baldurs Gate and DND friends, to both a unique character build and mod showcase. This is the perfect mod for a Halloween or horror themed playthrough with a new Warlock subclass from the Baldurs Gate 3 Nexus workshop. Behold the Dread Overlord. The background and lore for this mod is as follows. You are a cultist under a pact with a monstrous Dracolich necromancer known as the Dread Overlord. Under his banner, you aim to spread his maleficence and terror over all lands. In return for your service, boundless power over death itself and the promise of eternal life await. Command the very souls of the dead and raise powerful greater undead in his profane name. Alright, that was a pretty epic description of the subclass, and the mod author states that this is specifically a melee focused class utilizing unique necromancer mechanics such as the Soul Harvest, which the player can use to increase their armor class and provide better protection, or use them to curse and hinder your enemies for a more offensive playstyle. I really love how there is versatility in terms of combat playstyle, as well as really giving a new look and incentive to dive back into the Warlock. Before we get into the nitty-gritty features of the mod, I do want to thank my YouTube friend Alex Dura for recommending this to me. We got into a discussion over creating different types of necromancer characters, and I would love to dedicate this specific character build to them, and also to all of the Lord of the Rings fans out there, because we will be creating the Witch King of Angmar with this mod. Now, here's the catch. I want to showcase all 12 levels of this class. No multiclassing whatsoever, just pure leveling as a Dread Overlord to really showcase everything that the mod author has worked hard on. Afterwards, we can discuss multiclassing, and I do want to know some of your thoughts in the comments as well. What you think are some classes that would complement this if we were to multiclass. I do want to create a separate video on that, just because that is definitely something that we can cover entirely with a really in-depth discussion. Now, for those who don't know their Lord of the Rings lore, a little backstory on the Witch King of Angmar. He was once one of the greatest kings and rulers among men, specifically those of the peoples of Numenor, a proud and noble people who were steadfast friends of the elves of Middle-earth, and most of whom opposed the will of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. Sauron was a Dark Lord not just of strength, but of cunning as well, for it was he who gifted rings of power to humans, elves, and dwarves, only to completely turn on them and make an attempt to subjugate them all in one fell swoop. The elves threw aside their rings of power. The dwarves had incredible strong resistance to both physically and mentally, and humans weren't so lucky, especially since all 9 kings of men who took up these rings in hopes of gaining more power to rule only instead became too blind to their greed and realized too late that they would be servants of the Dark Lord, known as Ringwraiths or Nazgul. Alright, now right before I showcase the first level of this build, I will say that these kinds of builds I mainly create for roleplay, thematic purposes. I won't go too much into min-maxing per se. If you are one of those types of players, I totally respect that, but I myself, more so of a casual player, and really just want to showcase some interesting flavor builds, if that makes sense. The mod author did say that their subclass was powerful, but definitely not overpowered, which it's always a challenge to see for modded subclasses if they would fit within the game mechanics or just completely bulldoze over everything. Now, onto the build. For the race, you can stick with human or vanilla Baldurs Gate. And, well, the Witch King was technically a human in his past life, but because I want to make this as interesting as possible, I will be using the Fantastical Multiverse mod, and with this mod, it brings in a whole bunch of different races, and they're specifically from 5th edition D&D. For this build, we're going to pick the Disembodied race, which really plays well into the current state of the Witch King. He's more so of a wraith now, neither living nor dead, and the Fade Away ability embodies this really well mechanically and roleplay wise. Fading away and disappearing into the material plane can really help you get out of nail-biter combat situations, and later abilities such as Blur and Blink will help further along escape difficult encounters or position yourself to get a literal jump on your enemies. Just like other subclasses, the Dread Overlord gets access to 2 cantrips, but we will not pick up Eldritch Blast. Yes, you heard that right, no Eldritch Blast for this Warlock build, but there are specific reasons why it's better to forego Eldritch Blast in the long run, as it will benefit you in many ways, specifically with helping you raise more undead minions to do your bidding. Instead of Eldritch Blast, pick up Necrotic Touch as our bread and butter attack, and also it fits pretty well into the roleplay choice too. Speaking of roleplay choices, pick up Mind Sliver as your secondary cantrip. Doesn't really do too much in terms of damage, but it's a nice nod to the Witch King and the rest of the ring wraiths being able to use psychological warfare with their soul-wrenching screams and terror they sow onto the battlefield. Like I said, not about min-maxing, more so choosing things if they really fit into a character well. Spells are pretty limited at first level, but also, like I said, going back to roleplay wise, pick up Armor of Agathis to roleplay as the Lord of Angmar. This gives you a safety cushion of 5 temporary hit points while also punishing those who manage to actually hit you with 5 cold damage. This embodies the Witch King's spiteful nature. As fun fact, he's pretty salty about Gondor ruining his conquest and devastation of the northern kingdom of Arnor, and has a major disdain towards the royal line of Numenor, almost as much as Sauron himself. Inflict Wounds is just an overall solid potential damage melee necromancer spell to have in the early game. It's a nice homage to the crippling potential of a Morgul blade too. And yeah, you do have to get up close and personal to deliver that high damage, but hey, it adds a nice dynamic risk and reward feel to the combat strategy. For the background, choose Noble, as the Witch King was literally a Numenorian king with high standing in society before falling under the sway of Sauron. This provides a buff in history, but most importantly, persuasion, really playing into the subtle corruption the Witch King seeks to spread among the free peoples, and better showcased than the main ability score being charisma. Yes, no surprise, like every other Warlock subclass, you're gonna want to dump a lot of points in this ability for attack rolls and damage output. Get it up to 16 or 17, Wisdom staying baseline 10, so no negatives or positives for saving throws. However, you will be taking points away from Strength and Intelligence. As a Warlock, you won't be relying too much on those, and even though this is melee oriented, you will be relying on your undead minions to do most of the brunt melee work for you. Instead of those abilities, dump the rest of your points in Constitution or Dexterity, and really it could go either way. I decided to put my second highest points in Constitution for extra health later down the line. Dex is at a reasonable 14, as some of the features of the class actually can drastically increase your AC in combat to make up for potentially low dexterity. And speaking of which, let's dive into the feature which will help out with armor class and also raise your AC and make up for that loss in dexterity. With Invoker of Spirits Soul Harvest, you have the ability to harvest the souls of the dead and bind them in a shield of souls for protection or invoking the spirit's wrath against your enemies. You may bind a maximum of 1 additional soul to your soul shield, which increases the protection of your soul shield. As long as you have a captured soul available, you may invoke the spirit to spook your enemies, protect allies via a ghostly apparition, or will a vengeful phantasm to strike at your enemies. With Shield of Souls, you command the souls of the dead to surround you in a protective soul shield, initially adding 1 to your armor class until long rest. Wearing light, medium, or heavy armor restricts your ability to capture and command additional souls in battle. An update is with Commit Corpse. You may bind additional spirits to your shield via Commit Corpse, which provides an additional 1 to your armor class. Maximum 1 soul at levels 1 to 5. Binding additional souls over your maximum overcharges your shield, boosting resistances to physical damage for 3 turns. However, overfilling your shield results in belligerent souls that fight back against your control. Light, medium, and heavy armor restricts ability to control soul shield, and you may use this spell while in the middle of combat. With Souls of the Dead, the spirits swirling around you are screaming in terror and can be silenced via toggling. Invoking Spirit Spook releases the spirit from your soul shield to distract your enemies, allowing you to retreat to safety, thus consuming 1 spirit. Or you could use Invoke Spirit Apparition. Invoke a spirit to protect an ally, temporarily increasing their armor class for a short period of time. Providing 2 AC to an ally for 3 turns, consumes 1 spirit. Invoking Spirit Phantasm wills a vengeful phantasm to strike at an enemy, dealing unavoidable damage on hit, consuming, yes, another spirit, with 1d6 plus 1 necrotic damage. All of this provides us a chance of somewhat acting like a tank in combat, and really just encouraging you to get in the thick of it without having to be super concerned about being squishy like most other caster types out there. Some other sweet features to look forward to at the early stages are Level 1 Dread Cultist. As a cultist trained by the Order of the Dracolich, you are proficient with scimitars, flails, maces, and shields. You may call upon the Dread Overlord's power to ignite your weapon with his Dark Fire with the cantrip Necrotic Armaments. It imbues your melee weapon with necrotic energies for 10 turns, turning it magical and unable to be disarmed, dealing 1d6 necrotic damage at level 1, scaling with additional die at levels 5 and 10. You have access to Forbidden Lore, adding a +1 to any roll made with Arcana or History. In addition, Fellow Lore has taught you how to curse enemies with Night of the Living Dead with necrotic damaging cantrips, spells, and weapon attacks, dooming them into undeath upon dying. You also have access to Libor Mortis and can peruse its pages. Inflicting Curse is a talkable passive, allowing you to choose when to empower your cantrips, spells, and weapon attacks with Night of the Living Dead Curse. Minion points number of undead that can be raised via Night of the Living Dead is now limited to 2 per short rest for the most part. A few AoE spell and weapon attacks may sometimes raise multiple zombies by bypassing the limit. Reclaim Undead is a new level 1 cantrip to reclaim the zombies created by Night of the Living Dead, destroy them instantly while restoring minion points. You can reclaim as many zombies as you want above the maximum. Profane Blessing of Corrupted Armor. Spell power has laid claim to necromantic artifacts along the way to Baldur's Gate. One of them is rumored to be a heavy armor that will allow Dread Cultists to command the souls of the dead without restriction. Corrupted Grimoire is also another necromantic artifact. Finding it will decode and grant you additional profane knowledge and powers of the Dread Overlord. Alright everyone, I know that was a pretty lengthy start and background for this Necro Warlock Dread Overlord build, but I appreciate you all tuning in. For those of you who are new to the channel, it would really mean a lot to have you like, subscribe, and also hit those bell icons for more Baldur's Gate builds. And also I'd love to have you join us at the table if you're fans of D&D, Elder Scrolls, and even a little bit of Warhammer Fantasy. Alright, let's get into the next levels of the build. For Eldritch Invocations at level 2, you will pick up Fiendish Vigor for those temporary hit points should you find yourself in a prolonged battle, and personally I would choose Speak with Animals because, yeah, I would like to talk to that one cow in the early stage of the game and go through its quest. Silly reason, but hey, choices here are pretty inconsequential, and also, you can pick whatever spell you want for this level too. I chose Arms of Hadar just because it's a necromancer spell that synchronizes well with summoning more zombies. At level 3, pick up either Phantasmal Force or Crown of Madness, as either of those fits well into the dark sorcery of the Witch King, specifically with Crown of Madness. And fun fact, the Witch King's symbol when he ruled over the Ice Kingdom of Angmar was an iron crown. Pact of the Blade is what you will pick up here, as that way your attacks and damage with your flail will rely on charisma rather than strength alone. For spells, if you feel like replacing any, go ahead and mix and match the spells that I suggested before, depending on your playstyle. And yes, that goes for later levels too, when it asks what spells you would like to replace. Really, it's whatever you're feeling, just as long as you mostly stick to necromancer spells. At level 4, cantrip doesn't really matter here. Gust is a good pickup from the 5th edition spell mod, or Frostbite to grant disadvantage on enemy attack rolls. Old Person is a pretty good roleplay spell, as the Witch King and the rest of the ring wraiths were known to paralyze their enemies with fear. But also for the feat, this is one thing that I would specifically focus on, and pick ability improvement, dumping points into charisma for, even more damage. Level 5 is where you gain a major boost now. You gain an extra minion point, and also you're able to use Animate Dead to add to your zombie collection. You also have the ability to summon a Skeletal Warlock, which can double down with the ranged magic damage alongside your Witch King. Also, side note, I will say Animate Dead becomes incredibly overpowered with another mod called Animate Dead++. And basically, it just enhances the mod, buffs it a bunch, and increases the number of zombies able to be summoned. For spells at this level, pick up Vampiric Touch, and while ring wraiths weren't necessarily vampires themselves, both are pretty vile beings which can drain the life quickly from all living things. For Eldritch Invocations, pick up Mire of the Mind to slow enemies down, thus making them easy prey for your minions to chase down, annihilate, and potentially turn into more zombies for your army. As always, feel free if you want to replace any spells for others. Fear and Counterspell are both incredible clutch spells to turn the tide of battle too. Nothing really eventful at level 6, pick up any spell you want / didn't get in the previous level and mix and match them. At level 7, go ahead and pick up Phantasmal Killer to roleplay the Witch King using Barrow Wights to damage his enemies over time. For Eldritch Invocations, pick up Dreadful Word to sow confusion among the enemy lines. With level 8, it grants an extra zombie to be summoned with Animate Dead, but also a new unique minion to complement the Skeletal Warlock. The Skeletal Giant is a gargantuan frontline tank and will essentially be used to crush the enemy front lines, while also hopefully being used as a large target to distract the enemy instead of them focusing their attacks on you and the party. For a spell at this level, to fit the Witch King, I would choose Blight, as yes, another fun lore fact of the Witch King is that it is theorized that he or Sauron caused a plague that was essentially like medieval COVID that swept through Middle-earth and decimated entire populations, thus making it easier for him to conquer Arnor. You also gain another feat improvement, which you will use to top off Charisma, and the spare point can be used for Constitution, as more health is always the merrier and keeps you in the fight longer. At level 9, there's more minion points to add to your growing undead army. Pick whatever spell you want or didn't get a chance earlier. Not to influence you too much, but Cloudkill plays pretty well into the Witch King, what was said earlier of causing a plague to spread, or ring wraiths in general having that quote-unquote evil breath that brings despair to the men of Gondor when Osgiliath fell. Total Lord of the Rings nerd out moment there. But also for Eldritch Invocations, pick up Minions of Chaos, as elementals can be like your commanders for undead troops. Plus also if you're using Animate Dead++, that mod makes it so the AI controls most of the undead minions. However, you should at least have some control over the other minions as well. At level 10, pick up whatever cantrips or spells suit your fancy. Old Monster is very potentially useful, which would make sense lore-wise if you were to pick it up, considering the Witch King was able to tame and ride a fell beast. At level 11, you gain a spell slot, more spells, but also, specifically more importantly, Summoner of the Damned, which is a major upgrade to Animate Dead, which allows you to summon either a mummy, shadow, or Death Knight. And honestly, just trying to imagine a Death Knight fighting alongside a Skeletal Giant would make fights nearly, well, a lot easier, honestly. I don't want to get too overconfident, but basically you have extra minions for a front line. You can pick up either Mystic Arcanum, but Circle of Death is literally screaming edgelord ring wraiths and really just plays well roleplay wise. Last but not least, at level 12, pick up a feat most likely using Con and honestly, that just means more health for you. Life Drinker is a good Eldritch invocation to really dish out the pain. You can pick whatever spells you want for this class, but don't forget the endgame ability, the chance to summon a literal undead dragon. With the level 12 feature Profane Intervention aspect of the Dread Overlord, you may call upon your patron to aid you in battle. An aspect of the Dread Overlord intervenes, dealing damage in a wide area and itself until it is spent. With Night of the Living Dead, the aspect's attacks afflicts enemies with Night of the Living Dead, cursing them to rise again as undead minions in service of their new Dread Overlord. The aspect cannot be controlled, nor are the undead minions spawned by the aspect. The Necromancer and their allies within a large range of the aspect are endowed with Holy Vigor with Dread Ward, gaining resistances to weapon and necrotic damage. Aura of Despair, enemies within a large range of the aspect are stricken with despair, suffering disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. And yes, all of this description, your literal god comes in to help you in combat, and it's just pure epicness. Side note, I will say roleplay wise too, that being a servant of the Dracolich, it actually doesn't seem to have like too many downsides, honestly. Literally, if you devote yourself more to this god, they'll help you out in combat once you're a higher enough level. And getting into the gear of things, you can really pick whatever dark outfits you want for the character. For my personal preference and to go with the visual ring wraith appearance, I went with the Dark Drow hood for my headpiece, which also grants Detect Thoughts, the Deathstalker mantle, which I know it looks a little off-putting, but I mainly got it for the ability of the shadow itself. Once per turn, when you kill an enemy, shroud yourself in primeval darkness to become invisible for 2 turns. Dark Cultist robe is very good with matching the wraith-like appearance of the Nazgul. Black metal gloves, which is a teleport feature, yet again playing into the ring wraith's ethereal presence, and black leather footwear with Featherfall. I also decided to pick up a massive shield, giving a +4 to AC. Yeah, I know technically the Witch King didn't fight with a shield, but hey, matches the outfit nicely and provides more incentive for you to charge into combat alongside your minions. As for the weapon, Flail of Ages, like the Dread Lord class itself, is versatile, dealing either acid, chilled, or burning condition depending on what elemental age you gave it. Another option you can have is Blade of the First Blood, which deals necrotic damage, more of a chance for landing a critical hit, and Exploit Weakness, which makes enemies even more vulnerable to piercing attacks. Roleplay this as having the Morgul Blade of the Witch King. As always, let me know what equipment you would prefer to use or swap out with my choices, either metagame wise or specifically to better roleplay as a Nazgul or the Witch King himself. And also let me know in the comments your personal favorite builds, what you would like to see on this channel, and any requests or suggestions too. And if you love talking shop about all things D&D, Baldur's Gate, Warhammer, and Elder Scrolls, hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll save you a seat at the table for the next adventure.